So the first one we're going to talk about is the 50-22. So basically the concept is that if you start in your own 50, so on your side of the 50-meter line, and your team can kick the ball and have it roll out in the 22, okay, you get the line out back. Make sense? The big thing is that just similar to a 22 exit kick, you can't take the ball back into your own half. So if the ruck is, let's say, on the 40-meter and your halfback passes it back to someone who kicks it, okay, it's still going to be a line out, but it's not going to be your line out if it rolls out. So it has to be the ruck or whatever phase of play has to start from your side of the 50. It can't be carried back in. Okay, so the next one we're going to look at is another global law trial. So that means it's come from World Rugby. So the next one is called the goal line dropout. Again, another thing that we've sort of poached from rugby league. So this is basically replacing the 5-meter scrum from a held up call. And it's also replacing a 22 dropout in some circumstances. So basically what this one is now if the ball is carried or put into in goal by the attacking team and then they don't score, okay, instead of it previously being held up, which used to be a 5-meter scrum, or if it was a kick, it used to be a 22 dropout, it's now a goal line dropout. Okay, so basically why World Rugby has done this is to try to encourage people, particularly with those attacking kicks, to just run it back. Okay, because previously we'd have people just ground it and then we'd have to go all the way back to the 22, and before you know it, you'd be back in your half and have lost all that pressure. So it's basically trying to encourage people to run kicks out. So the big change is that if you're a back 3, you need to now be aware that if you ground it after someone else has kicked it in, okay, it's going to be a goal line instead of a 22, which can be a bit of a disadvantage. Some specifics with the goal line dropout is that it has to go 5 meters. So obviously with a 22-meter dropout, it only has to go over the 22, so you can do the little quick ones. So we can't do that with a goal line dropout. It has to travel 5 meters. Okay, so that means if you're defending it, you can be anywhere on the 5-meter line, okay, but it has to at least go 5 before we can play it. Other than that, there's nothing sort of minimum. You can also take it from anywhere on your goal line, so you can take it from wherever you want. Okay, the other big thing, just like a 22 and just like a restart after a try, it can't go directly into touch. So you can't just goal line drop out, kick it directly into touch. If you do that, it's going to be a restart scrum to the other team anywhere on your 5-meter. So we definitely want to make sure that we're putting those into play. So the next one we're going to look at, guys, is the flying wedge, okay, which is another global law. So this is called from World Rugby. We don't get that much of it in the Southern Hemisphere compared to England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, where the conditions, they play a little bit in tight, where we like to throw the ball around a little bit more down here. So we don't get that much of it, but it is still something that we need to know, particularly because some teams will still use it when we're nice and close to the try line. So we want to make sure that you guys aren't getting into trouble with that. So what we've got in this circumstance, team, is we've got a ruck here, and then we've got a pod of probably forwards over here. Okay, and different teams use different attacking setups, but we've probably got 2 or 3 forwards here. So what the flying wedge says under law is that basically we can only have a maximum of 1. So if this is going to end up being the ball carrier, we can only have 1 person pre-bound to him. So pre-bound means before he gets the ball. So what the picture they're trying to prevent is, and again, we don't do this very much, but in the Northern Hemisphere they do it a bit, is we're trying to prevent these 2 guys binding onto him like a scrum almost, and creating this sort of like flying wedge shape. So then pass to him, and then they drive in. So that's now illegal. We can't have 2 people pre-bound. So you can sort of see how they create that like V shape, like kind of Mighty Ducks style. Okay, so that's now illegal. That's called a flying wedge. Okay, so basically what we can still have is he can still stand at the front. He can have his 2 support players around him. Okay, the halfback can pass him the ball. He can take contact and these guys can clear out. Cool, so the next one we're going to talk about that kind of comes from the flying wedge is about what we call the latcher. Okay, so we've just established that we can't have 2 people pre-bound to someone anymore. Okay, we can still have 1 person pre-bound to the ball carrier. So that's fine. So we can't have 2, but we can still have 1. Now, the only difference is anyone who is pre-bound to the ball carrier has to stay on their feet. Okay, sweet. So we're going to have a pick and go here. Now, again, most coaches will encourage this person to pre-bind onto the ball carrier. Does that make sense? You guys have all heard that before? So previously what we've seen, like I was demoing to you guys, is So you're gonna pick and you're just gonna go like fall right on top of him. Does that make sense? I'll be the, so there's normally a defender here. This guy picks into me. So he picks, and this guy would just come like this right on top of him. Obviously he'd be trying to move me out of the way. Okay? Now, obviously the reason we want to get rid of that is if I'm the defender, there's now nothing I can do to get that ball. Because it's underneath him. We call it killing the contest, which rugby, particularly in New Zealand, we don't really want that, right? We want everyone to be able to get the ball. Okay, so what we now have to do, so this guy is totally allowed to do what he's doing. He's allowed to be pre-bound. He's called the latcher because he's latched onto this person. However, under this new rule, or interpretation I should say, he just has to now stay on his feet. So he is more than welcome to be pre-bound. So this guy's gonna pick, he's gonna come into me, okay? But he now has to stay in an upright position because now him and I can have a contest over the ball. So the next one we're going to look at, lads, is all about targeting people when we're cleaning out at the ruck. So a lot of the stuff, and again, you guys probably heard it when you're watching all the All Blacks things, basically a lot of the things World Rugby brings in are all about safety. They're not always the most popular things, but that's basically all around rugby is all about keeping people who are playing them safe. Okay, so the big one that they've now brought in is around how when we are trying to clean out defending players, what we are and aren't allowed to do. Okay, so we've previously talked about in the latcher picture, we have to stay on our feet so we can have a contest. Okay, but in having a contest, that does mean that we have to keep the person who's potentially going to go for the ball safe as well. Cool, so basically what we're looking for is if I'm the jackler and I'm trying to steal the ball, now obviously I have to meet my obligations first. So my team, if someone's made a tackle, my team has to get out of the way. So there's no tackler from my team on the ground. I also have to make sure that I'm on my feet and that I've come through the middle. So I can't come around like this. I have to come through the middle of the tackle. Now, in terms of, let's say I've done everything right, my teammate's done everything right, so I'm now in a position where I'm gonna reach over and try to steal the ball. Okay, this basically says that what we don't want is we can't have attacking players try to take out, it's called, the law says lower limbs, which just means legs. I don't know why they complicate it. So it just means legs. Now the reason for this is it's really quite dangerous if you think about it. If someone flies in with a shoulder and takes out my knee, they can do some quite serious damage to my knee, potentially to their head, potentially to a lot of different things. Okay, so basically what we're looking at is if you're trying to clear out a jackler because I'm on the ball, we want to see people hitting through shoulders, through chests, through up here, not people flying through and trying to clean out knees or coming across like this and cleaning people out. The first one is around the scrum reset. Most of you guys have probably had these already this year, so hopefully they'll be a little bit familiar. Okay, so a reset scrum basically means that the ref has stopped the scrum before the ball has gone in, or the ball's gone in but no one's won it and he's reset the scrum, he or she. Make sense? Now, we are trying to get less resets because they take heaps of time, they're really boring, and they're just not that fun, and they eat into your guys' time of actually being able to play rugby. So we're trying to get rid of the resets. So one of the experimental domestic safety law variations is that if we have a scrum reset, okay, so your team's feeding it in, okay, let's say something happens and there's no clear infringement, meaning the referee can't identify someone specifically who's at fault, okay, instead of the reset and another contested scrum, okay, under the domestic safety law variation, you, if you're the feeding team, meaning it's your put in, get awarded a free kick. Okay, which means that you can either pass it to your 8 and you can tap and go, okay, you can have another scrum, but if you do the next scrum will be uncontested, sometimes called golden oldies, which just means you don't push. It's like a rugby league scrum, feed in and we go. The other scrum specific one, now this isn't a change because so World Rugby in a normal scrum, again you will see All Blacks, Blues, all NPC, all of those players, they can push the scrum as far as they want, right? So you'll see teams start on the 5 meter and push it all the way in. Okay, now World Rugby, an under 19 law variation, so that's all secondary school rugby in New Zealand, is that you can only push the scrum 1.5 meters. Okay, yep, heads in. Okay, so the attacking halfback is going to feed the ball in on the left-hand side. Okay, we've now got a new, basically for everything other than first 15, okay, the defensive team's halfback's offside line is now at the tunnel. Okay, so he can't come past this side. Okay, so previously we used to be able to go all the way down here to the 8. We now can't do that. Now, some options available to our defensive halfback is he can come to the back of his own side, okay, and then he can move 2 meters either side of the scrum. So if he doesn't want to wait here to defend and he does want to come over here, he can come to his 8's feet and stay. Okay? So that won't apply to first 15 rugby, but other than that, that applies to everyone. Okay, you guys can stand up. Thank you for leaning in. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about, guys, is again a change that has really come from, so it's a New Zealand change, but basically around a major league concern for safety. So you guys will see on TV, Caleb Clark had a big incident with it early in the year. The All Blacks had one. Basically, anytime we're jumping for a ball, we can't play the player in the air. So everyone's always known that. But we were getting a situation where even the incidental contact, so incidental means not on purpose, was creating some quite dangerous collisions, right? Where people are in the air, they're flying, they've got no control over themselves, okay, and they're flying into other people and doing some serious damage. So New Zealand Rugby thought that was an area that's relatively easy to eliminate from some of our developing grades, just to make sure you guys are safe as you go up through the grades. So basically, that changes 2 things. So from a ball carrier point of view, so from the person that's going to catch the ball, okay, you now are not allowed to jump. Okay, so you have to keep your feet on the ground. So if you do jump, it's a free kick against you. Now, in order to keep you safe, okay, because obviously we don't want people just having to stand there, catch the ball, and then getting walloped, okay, the defending team, so the person who's coming towards you to tackle you, okay, cannot immediately hit you. Okay, they have to give you time to either run, so to take a step, or to make a pass. All right, the last one we're going to talk about is the tackle height. So this is just specific to secondary schools, and it's only been brought in by New Zealand Rugby. So this isn't they've trialed it, I think, in some overseas venues with World Rugby, but hasn't come in. Basically, this is around where the tackle height can be. Okay, so in senior rugby, the tackles in rugby have to be below the shoulder. Okay, so that's part of why we don't let those like seatbelt tackles go anymore, where someone's chasing and their arms come over your top like this, which we'll see a lot of in other sports. Okay, so senior rugby, it's all about the shoulders. Now, anything other than first 15 rugby, again, in the interest of safety, okay, New Zealand Rugby have moved the tackle height down. So it's now your sternum. Okay, so your sternum is the bone in the middle of your chest. So if you push in the middle of your chest, you've got like a little plate bone there. Okay, that's your sternum. It's kind of like if you drew a line across your armpits, that's where you'll end up. Okay, now that's probably only maybe 6 inches lower than the shoulder, but the theory behind that is actually they would prefer that all of our tackles are actually happening at the waist, really, because if you're aiming for the sternum, okay, it's pretty hard to hit someone specifically there. So really, we're actually, the ideal is that we're coming in at the waist and we're making low tackles.